And if you Google, why would you even do that? It doesn't even make sense. Google did a good job with this one, and I don't want to take anything away from them, but they also left a lot of things to be desired. In this video, I want to go over the good and the bad of the Pixel 9 Pro Fold and see where I think Google actually messed up. Let's start off with the good, and I'm going to start with the internal specs. Google went with the Tensor G4, which is a 2-generation leap because the original Pixel Fold had the Tensor G2. Of course, we're still talking about the Tensor series, so it's not going to have the same raw power that Snapdragon has, but it's going to be a lot better than the Tensor G2. And I've noticed that the heat dissipation seems to be a lot better on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold than on the previous generation or the original Pixel Fold. And I'm betting that also has a lot to do with the Tensor G4. The RAM was also upgraded to 16 gigabytes, which is gonna kind of future-proof the phone, really. It's been mentioned that the AI features require some RAM, so that's gonna help to kind of let the features come in and still be relevant even in the future. So 16 gigabytes of RAM is still on the high side in today's standards, but really when you take out the 3 gigs, which I heard mentioned is what the current set of AI features is using, that leaves about 13 gigs of RAM for regular phone use. Either way, that's a really good amount of RAM and it's gonna give you enough to do whatever you want. Now I wanna move to the internal screen, and this was a major improvement in my book. The first thing that I noticed was the increased brightness right away, and it's now at 2700 nits of peak brightness, and that's gonna help you to use a phone in outdoor in pretty much any scenario, and you're not gonna have any issues seeing it. On top of that, Google also added a anti-reflective screen protector. So the increased brightness plus the anti-glare screen protector, the internal viewing experience is much better than on the previous generation. In addition to those two things, they also reduced the crease or made it a bit shallower. So it's gonna help with the experience once again. Just everything about the inner screen is just that much better. And it just keeps on going with the inner screen. They also reduced the bezels on the inner screen by a ridiculous amount because, you know, the one on the original Pixel Fold was actually really big, so it's not too hard to reduce that. But it's not just, you know, a good size bezel compared to the previous generation. Just overall, it's already a pretty good size bezel as it is. And I think that the bezels were allowed to be thinner because the hinge style is different. So it is a bit thinner, and I think it overall looks a bit better than the original one. But I mean, the overall phone design changed, so it's kind of hard to tell if the hinge is really what helped it look a bit better. One thing I will mention though is that the behavior of the hinge is definitely different than on the original Pixel Fold. The original one was much stiffer and lets you hold it in different positions, like without moving at all. The new hinge kind of assists you in opening it a bit, so it kind of has like that spring and lock type feel when you're opening it. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to hold the same positions that the original Pixel Fold did. But some might like that better. It depends on really how you use it. As long as you don't use the tabletop mode in any extreme angles, the hinge is going to be perfectly fine for you. And of course, with every new generation, you also get an improvement in features and software. And on this one, it has my favorite feature from the Pixel 8 Pro, which is the facial unlock or the increased security facial unlock. But basically, you can use the face unlock to unlock banking apps and other apps that require like a higher level of security. And with the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, it's not just on the front camera that you can use it, it's also on the inner main screen camera that you can use it, which was something that just wasn't available at all with the Pixel Fold, the original one. So now you don't have to close the phone to use it or use your fingerprint. You can actually use your face unlock with the main screen. And continuing on with the software, you also get the video boost and the night mode or night boost with the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which is something that just wasn't available again with the original Pixel Fold, even though I would consider that to be a Pro phone. Now let's move on to the build quality. And this is where I'm probably the most excited for this phone because it's literally as good as it gets in terms of build quality. Visually, I can see it being polarizing because of the camera bump and maybe a few other aspects to it. And when I was looking at it online, I wasn't sold at all with the visuals of it, honestly. But when I got it in person and I opened it, I mean, you can see that the quality is there visually without even touching it. And then the camera bump looks, in my opinion, better in person than it does on the pictures on the website. It just blends in better with the phone style, and the size is good for the overall phone. It's not as blocky and as large as it looked, even though there is a pretty big step on it, but you kind of need that with folding phones, especially one as thin as this one. Everything on the phone feels premium, and the buttons themselves are good as well. They're actually very quiet, even though you do feel them being clicky. They're very quiet, so you could barely hear them when you're pressing them. And as with all the Pixels, the button placement is as good as it gets because you don't have to reach for anything. Everything is easily accessible. Of course, you do have the power button on top and the volume button on the bottom. So if you're not used to Pixel, that will take some getting used to. But if you are used to Pixel, then you'll feel right at home. Google also made some pretty good strides with their weight. I know it's still the heaviest of the three that are available right now in the US market, but when you compare it to the original one, it's a lot lighter. It's at 259 grams now compared to the 280 something that it was previously. I think it was 283. So that's a big difference. I mean, when a phone drops 10 grams, you can actually feel it quite a bit. So this dropped about 30 grams almost, or 20 something grams. And you're gonna be able to feel that when you're carrying it. Another thing I want to point out is that this has possibly the thinnest gap between the two halves from any of the phones. The only one that might compete with it is the Z Fold 6. Definitely the OnePlus Open doesn't because it has a larger gap. I mean, there's different reasons for it. Like the larger gap is gonna make it easier to open it, but this is gonna be a lot nicer to look at. And actually, when you're carrying it, it almost feels like a regular phone. You could barely feel the difference between the two halves. And it's an awesome feeling to kind of feel like you have a regular phone and then to be able to open it up. And the phone being so thin also helps to have that illusion that it's a single piece phone, standard phone. So just everything's just working really well together to give you that nice feel of having a standard phone when you're using it. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the screen dimensions or the aspect ratio, which now follows the standard style, the standard aspect ratio. It's not something that I'm, ecstatic about because I thought that the original Pixel Fold had a good aspect ratio. I didn't really have any complaints about it. But I guess, between the sales and the comments, Google was led to believe that this is the optimal aspect ratio. So they went with it. To me, it's a neutral thing, and it's really going to come to the person that buys it, whether they prefer this style or the shorter style, which I actually thought was pretty cool and unique. But talking about the main screen, that's a easy transition to one of my main complaints, which is the larger bezels and the larger border between the screen and the frame. So this is the second generation for Pixel, and you're gonna expect to see improvements everywhere. And for the most part, that's the case. But when you look at the front screen, the bezels are actually a bit larger, and then you have a larger gap from the screen to the outside of the frame. It doesn't make sense to me because if they would have fought a bit more to make that a bit thinner, it would have felt even more comfortable than this currently is, because this almost feels like the original Pixel Fold in terms of width, but the screen is just not as wide. So that's kind of like wasted space in my opinion. And if you Google, why would you even do that? It doesn't even make sense. You have newer technology, you've had a year and a half to work on it, and even though the phone is mostly improved, this larger bezels is a step back. This is like, these bezels are kind of like a folding phone from 3 years ago, maybe even 4, how large they are. It's pretty bad. And when you compare it to the Z Fold 6, it's night and day because Z Fold 6 went with the thinnest bezels I've seen yet. So I guess the silver lining is that Google has something to work on for the next Pixel Fold. And the second thing that I find negative about the Pixel 9 Pro Fold is the camera. Both hardware and software have something that I don't like. For starters, let's go with the hardware, and that's that the main sensor is a 1/2 inch sensor, which for main sensors, that's small nowadays. And for comparison, the Z Fold 6, which is not known to have the best main sensor, still has a 1/1.57, which I think my math came out to about 20% larger than the Pixel 9 Pro Folds. I know this is the same size as the original Pixel Fold, so it's not like it's a downgrade, but it should definitely be using a larger sensor. And also Google does do some magic, but why not just use the best sensor you can? It's already a pretty big bump. Maybe it can't use the main sensor from the 9 Pro or the 8 Pro, but maybe find a sensor that's somewhere in between, because half-inch just seems kind of small for a main sensor, especially one on a phone that's 1,800 bucks. And my second camera issue is actually software, and it's with the camera app and the features that are available. It doesn't have every single pro feature that I would expect to have, given that the name is 9 Pro Fold. So let me list out the things that I've at least noticed up to this point. First, let me start off with one thing that isn't really available on any of the pros. So you can't use the telephoto for portrait mode, and that still doesn't make sense to me, and you're wasting a lens, and especially for portraits where that really comes in handy. Hopefully at some point in this year or next year, Google gets it together and gives you the ability to use the telephoto for portraits. But that's just one that's just general right now. But specific to the 9 Pro Fold, you can't shoot in 8K. I know the sensor might be smaller, so they might have some issues, but it still has enough megapixels to shoot in 8K, so why doesn't it, you know? The quality might not be the same as the regular Pro lineup, the 9 and 9 XL, but it would still be better than 4K for anyone that wanted to use it. And it's a Pro feature, it should be in the Pro Fold. And the second one, which makes even less sense to me, is that you can't shoot in full resolution from what I've seen. I've checked the settings and I've checked the quick pop-up Pro settings. There's just nowhere that I see where you can shoot full resolution photos. Again, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter what the megapixels are on the main sensor, even if it was 24, you should be able to shoot in the full resolution if you wanted to. Given that it's 48, it's so close to 50. I mean, it would have been an equal result in my opinion. Why not just have it available for this phone? So these might not seem like a big deal for everyone, but for me, you're paying a lot for this phone. It has a Pro name on it now, and you still don't have all the Pro features. It just doesn't make sense. Overall, the phone is nice. Aesthetically, it's pleasing to look at. It has a lot of good features and some features that aren't even available on the competition. So if someone were to ask me for a recommendation, would I recommend this phone? It would be hard for me to consider this to be my main recommendation for a large folding phone. I would probably even consider pointing someone to the 1-year-old OnePlus Open, depending on what they like. But definitely not an easy recommendation considering the competition. Maybe in the near future, Google will release some software that's gonna make it like a must-have that you can't really live without. But as of now, aside from the facial recognition being at a different level, there's not really anything that sets it above the other ones. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you buy the Pixel 9 Pro Fold? And if not, which of the foldables would you buy? If you are interested in buying the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, I do have an affiliate link for Amazon down in the bottom in the description. If you want to watch the review of the Z Fold 6, click here. And if you want to watch the review of the OnePlus Open, click here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.